And greetings and welcome to the QCast and welcome to season 3, episode 24. Thanks to everyone that's been so supportive of the QCast. Sorry for about the, what have I been, about a week and a half with a little delay in episodes here. I've been battling a nasty little illness situation. I think I'm coming out of it here, which is good. And we're here in the, what I think is the best weeks plural of the year. No better time to bring back one of our favorite guests, Sara Quatrocky, the athletic director at Maryville College and the chair of the men's basketball national committee. Sara, things are heating up. Like, this is no longer, we're talking in October
Right.
and it's philosophical. Like, we're in the heart of it. You're in the heart of
Yeah.
it. How are things going here? Conference tournament week, rankings have come out this week. Tell me how everything's going for you guys.
Yeah, this has been a pretty pivotal week, obviously. I think and a lot of people know. It's been really fun though. This is why we all enjoy being on the committee is for this week. Going back to Monday when we started preparing for our weekly rankings, I reminded everybody that this week's rankings were the hardest ones we were going to do. Hardest ones we're going to do all year. Mostly because it's the most accurate data that we're going to have. It's the most accurate data we had to date. And so there's going to be people out there that are going to really critique on the rankings that we had this week, because I don't think a lot of people understood that, it wasn't until this week that this was the most accurate snapshot that we had in real time of evaluating teams. And so, this is where you're always going to see like maybe some, flips to some teams, or some teams that dropped or jumped up in rankings. And it's because this week's snapshot was significantly different for some
Right.
teams' resumes. And so, Tuesday's national call is always for this week the hardest one we have. And I always remind the committee that this is the hardest day of the week, and then the rest of the week just gets more fun as it goes by. I met with a small group of our committee, our executive team yesterday. We started preparing our big boards. Those are just our regional, big boards, just kind of doing some projections. Today we presented those to the rest of the committee, and you kind of saw the lights go on to the committee, like, oh wow, this really isn't that hard, because we have 44 AQs. So really just identifying like where some leagues might have some bid steals. We got to keep an eye on that. Obviously, when that happens, our bubble gets smaller. And identifying teams that, we might, that we think right now are probably in the tournament, kind of our upper echelon, kind of at large teams that we know are probably getting in. And then what are our teams that are going to be on our bubble? And every day, just evaluating those teams and evaluating the updated criteria, because we're at the point now where every day our data is getting refreshed. And so we're asking our committee to just be really flexible with us, with their time, and giving us newly ranked, top 20s, and newly ranking the bubble teams every day, and, kind of helping us get the most accurate data that we can. So it's really fun. I mean, we're all in this because we love basketball and we love watching games. And we were all texting each other last night with some of the upsets, and it was like, oh, we got to fix our big boards already because we've had some teams, kind of fall out already. So, I mean, this is why we're doing it. And it just gets more fun. So
It's
as
a
the
it's a
next few
it's a
days
fun
go
time of
by.
year. I was watching the
Yeah.
Cairn Keystone game last night, which obviously is a big deal. That's a
Yep.
league that, unless you guys throw us a curveball, is probably going to be just the AQ, and
Yep.
so that creates a lot of excitement now as Wilson plays Keystone, I think, for the title of
Mhm.
that league, and you have all kinds of games like that happening right now. It's just a wonderful week. Just a couple topics on mine, and it just, for those of you that are tuning in that would like me to ask Sara about like specific little things that have been debated on Twitter with
Yeah.
rankings. We're in the middle of it now, so like when the
Yeah.
season's over, if Sara chooses to go on Hoopsville with Dave or whoever and be on the hot seat around like why was this team chosen and not that team, she'll do that afterwards. But
Yep.
it wouldn't be appropriate at this point to comment on specific like resume stuff. So I'm just going to pick some themes and ask Sarah to talk through those. The first, Sarah's around, this is kind of an age old one, the balance between winning percentage and strength of schedule and RROs and common opponents and blah, 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 the whole criteria. I think a lot of what I've seen this week on Twitter from people who, and generally things have been positive, but the people that are questioning certain rankings feel like there's not a balance, or there maybe one of the criteria is being zoomed in on. Like, so I've read the committee loves SOS, they love RROs or whatever. Can you talk through how you guys evaluate all the criteria as you're making your decisions?
Yeah, we've been really intentional with tracking all of our decisions as we go through each region. And we purposefully don't start like every week by evaluating, let's say, like region 1 first, right? Just so that we're not just always going region 1, region 2, all the way to region 10. So we are very intentional by switching it up so that we don't get into that habit of just always looking at the same teams first and the same teams last, because, our calls do last, hours, right? So we're switching up those regions, just very intentional about how we're evaluating. And then we are tracking every decision that we make, we're tracking, we're going back to it, like when we're evaluating teams and that balance of the winning percentage and the SOS, tracking on a decision that we made, maybe in another comparison to a comparison in another region. Like we're going back to that. Okay, like in that decision that we made in that comparison, what was the ratio of SOS compared to winning percentage in that one? So we are doing that because we have to evaluate the totality of the resume. And so I think some of the criticism that we've received as a national committee, I think some people forget we have this, the whole body of work that we have to look at in that resume. And I think we've been very transparent from October that we are going to evaluate the wins in that RRO column. It's not that we love SOS, but we are going to evaluate what that SOS means. And we've been pretty transparent that your winning percentage will get you to the table, and the SOS is going to validate your winning percentage. And so you might be a team that, okay, yeah, you don't have any bad losses, or you might not have very few losses, but does your SOS validate the winning percentage? And so we are tracking that. And so I think that's where, we see it as maybe we're getting criticism, but we're looking at the totality of the resume. And some might think that we're looking too hard, but I think we're just doing our jobs. That's the job that we have. We have 10 very dedicated committee members that love looking at this. And that's what I mean. We're really evaluating the totality of the resume. We're looking at, I think that we have teams that have gone out and they've played a very competitive schedule. And so we have to make sure that we're doing our due diligence by looking to see what that record stands for in the RRO category. And if we're not doing that, then shame on us. I think that that's our job as a committee to do that.
So when people are looking at these rankings, I mean, at the end of the day, I believe what you're saying is people can debate, team A being ahead of team B and what the order should be. But the committee, if team A is ahead of B, it means the committee has determined that team A's overall resume using all the primary criteria is better. So again, let's remind people: winning percentage, strength of schedule, results versus regionally ranked opponents, head to head, and common opponents. When you look at those things, and potentially you could jump into secondary with things like non-conference SOS, but if team A is ahead of team B, it means the committee has determined that the overall resume is better for team A. And people can debate that, but that's how you arrived at that place. Correct?
And also too, like, I think where people get caught up a lot too is the head-to-head does not always just automatically win the day. That is just one singular criteria. just like winning percentages. Winning percentage is just one singular criteria, and so is head to head. And so a 1-0 head to head, we look at differently than a 2-0 head to head. 2-0 is significantly different than a 1-0 head to head in the eyes of the committee. And so I think that's where, again, we've seen or heard some criticism on that as well. But you have to remember that the head to head is just a singular criteria. It does not just automatically, if a team has a head to head, you don't just win the day, and we're not evaluating the rest of that resume just because you have a head to head win over a particular team.
That's an important one. I think I always use this example, and it's old now, but it's one I remember. And there was a years ago where Wheaton or Illinois Wesleyan was 3-0 against Wheaton, but on the season, Wheaton's resume was just way better. And so had the committee put Wheaton ahead of had the committee put Illinois Wesleyan ahead of Wheaton, neither team would have been a Pool C because Illinois Wesleyan's resume was not very good.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always use that to say, like, you said that 1-0 isn't the end all be all. I mean, 2-0 doesn't even have to be,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I'm not trying to use specifics. There's one I can think of that, like Stockton and Rowan. Rowan's beat Stockton 2 times. There could come a point right now. Like Rowan was ahead of Stockton in the region, has been. But if that gap between the resumes got to a certain point,
Yep.
the 2-0, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. The
Yep.
2-0 wouldn't be the final outcome in that one if the resume was separated. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say. That's a fair statement. Yeah. That's
Okay.
fair. Yeah. I mean, if it was close, and I mean, we're splitting hairs, the winning percentage SOS kind of, was close, or let's say they were outliers on each side, right?
Right.
And then we use maybe that 2-0 as the tiebreaker within the primary criteria. We try to make, I think one thing that we really try to do, we've really tried to make a priority, is to make our decisions what we call on the first page, and that's primary criteria.
Right.
And so we've really tried to make most of our decisions because there is a lot there. There's a lot of information on primary criteria for most of these teams that we're talking about.
Right.
And so, it's, the primary criteria is there for a reason. It's called primary criteria. And so that's what we're trying to make, 99% of our decisions based on. And so I think that's another important thing for people to hear and know, that that's what we are, our focus is to make our decisions, and we have a committee member that's always like, there's enough here to make, there's enough information here to make, on primary criteria. And so, and there are decisions too where, we do have to vote as a committee, where it's like, we'll go round and round and round. Cause I mean, I would hope that people know there are resumes out there in these rankings. I mean, they are really, really similar, and these are really tough decisions. And I mean, but we'll end up voting.
Right.
And it, and that's just how it is. I mean, you have to remember, these are, it's people, and we're just using the data that's, just like you all, I see you all on Twitter, and, some of you agree with this ranking or that ranking, and that's how we are too on the committee. And so, we have different opinions, or different ways that we see it as well.
The head-to-head thing is really important. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
I won't ask you to comment on this one. I'm just going to give everyone an example. Another example of this one is in the first ranking. I believe Hampton-Sydney was ahead of Christopher Newport. Hampton-Sydney has beaten Christopher Newport, and the resumes were, to me, they were close enough. But then I believe Hampton-Sydney lost, and now it flipped. So it flipped.
Yep.
So even though Christopher Newport lost to Hampton-Sydney, now they're ahead. And I thought that was an easy one to call on the front end, because the numbers had changed. It wasn't a tie anymore, and it wasn't close anymore. So now, Chris, right?
The totality of that resume just wasn't the head to head, just it wasn't the end all be all for that the snapshot on that comparison any longer. Yeah, that's a good one to point out. Yeah.
Let me ask that this is probably something that I've talked about on Twitter this week, and I don't know how this works. It's, to me, like in a perfect world, the philosophy at the regional level, at the rack level, and the way things are interpreted in a perfect world would line up at the national level. And I think they do.
Yeah.
And so like if you have in a region, I assume that when you guys are looking at a region from a national perspective, I mean, is it fair to say that generally the way the rack lines the teams up would be the way that at the national level you would also line those same teams up if they were, say, on a pool C board? Is it like, do you look at them to make sure that there's consistency with what your racks are doing versus what the national is doing? Does that question make sense?
Like, are you asking like for what we're doing for this weekend per se?
No, more
Yeah.
just like as the regional rankings are done each week,
Yeah.
I know that you guys are reviewing the
Yeah.
rack stuff to
Yeah.
make sure that like nothing is misaligned really.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a checks and balances process is maybe my question between
Yes.
national and regional to make sure that like everyone's kind of on the same page. Is that, am
Yeah.
I saying that correctly?
Yeah. I mean, so for pool C, I guess how we do it on the men's committee, quite honestly, I mean, we're starting that process now. So we're starting the process now with almost like our projections, like I had mentioned earlier, region by region, we're going through and kind of determining, region one, here's a league where we know that, if so and so doesn't win, this could be a bid steal.
Right.
So and so doesn't win, they're still going to be an at large. So we're already kind of like determining like how many pool C and bubble teams we're going to have, and this is going to be the group of our teams, right? And I
Right.
think that, and I see all the projections that you guys are doing, so it's very similar to what you guys are all doing, and that's what we're doing now, but we're doing it off of the current data that we have every single morning.
Right.
And so we're staying current with the data every morning, with all the games that are coming in from each night. And we're just updating the data that we have. And so we're also doing that too, because we're going to have to determine host sites, bracketing, who's our top 4 seeds. As we've spoken before, we try to have the most national bracket that we could have. We try to seed it 1 through 16. We try to prioritize the host sites based on that 1 through 16. If we can, with all other sorts, there's all other sorts of just things that we need to determine, but that is the priority. And so, we're doing kind of like a reorder of that almost every single morning now. And so, and that's what we started doing yesterday. And, but that's, I think, our checks and balances,
Right.
every single day, as we get into those, final moments, with the pool C bids. And so some of those pool Cs will become obvious, as this process continues to happen day by day here. And then, like I said, those tough decisions Sunday evening, we'll have to see how large our bubble is, how small our bubble is. Last year, it was like almost every tournament kind of went chalk. We didn't have any
Right.
upsets. So I almost feel like maybe this year we will have some upsets, so I don't know. We have some tournaments getting moved around right now for weather. So, we'll see. I think we have a few more championships being played on Sunday. That won't really affect us. We'll just kind of keep that, just keep an eye on that as we're moving forward. But I think our checks and balances is just really making sure that we're being active as soon as we're getting new data, and
Right.
making sure that we're doing our reordering, doing our, 1 through 16 every single day. determining who's on our bubble, here's our bubble teams, and ordering them, evaluating them every single day. On Saturday, it'll be evaluating them after each round of games are over, right? Okay, here's the 1 o'clock games. Let's push data again. Here's the 2 o'clock games. Let's push it again. And that's the fun part, right? Because we get to do it over and over and over again. And we've got a good group going to Indy that'll be there in person. And then, of course, the rest of the guys will kind of join us throughout the day when they can. We have some that are playing in their own championships. But yeah, we'll have a good group of ND just sitting around watching games, pushing data, updating post-it charts and boards. And it's just a really fun experience because like I said, we all enjoy each other's time, and in basketball. And we already have, there's a couple of us already, working on bracket projections as we speak. So that's the fun part.
On the geography bracketing,
Yeah.
I'm going to make a statement, and I think it's true, and I just want to confirm it's true. As someone was asking after the top 16 reveal, I think it was a Twitter question of like, oh, they'll never take that team because they're from an island area or something. When it comes to your selections, your pool C selections, you guys never consider geography in selecting. You just have to deal with the bracketing side of it. Is that correct? You would never rule a team out because they're in a state that's not close to other states, correct?
Yeah. If you deserve to be in the tournament, you're going to be in the tournament, and then we'll figure out where you're going to play basketball that weekend. So, and like I've said before, I mean, no one comes in the room on Sunday and says you have X amount of flights. We just, are told to be responsible and try to make the bracket as responsible as possible. So, but yeah, we'll do what we can.
You mentioned trying to create a national bracket within the rules. And what I would say to everyone is go check out the Division II bracket and how that's constructed. It is a completely regional tournament. If you look at Division II, they take all the teams, like all the teams in the East with Bentley #1, and then those teams are competing to get out. And so if you look at the way the Division III bracket works, it's not the Division I bracket, but honestly, if you look at last year's bracket, it's pretty cool. I mean, if you look at the, like Elmhurst came out of a bracket and had Illinois Wesleyan beaten Wabash, you would have had two CCIWs playing each other in the Final Four. It's a pretty cool bracket. The question I have for you, just to clarify, is you've got like a top 16 you revealed, and to me, that's already kind of old news. Like the numbers, like that was fun and everything, but like people shouldn't be like have a poster of that on their wall and think those are the hosts, right?
No. So there could be hosts within that, but those numbers have already changed. Even I think that night
stuff already happened.
Yeah, they had already changed. So we do that process. It's a fun process, and I think it's great for the teams and student athletes, and even for us to do as like a practice for the voting and to show, because I don't even think people understand that we use the voting system. I still don't think that there are people in Division III basketball that understand how we vote in teams. I think they truly think that we're just like taking the best teams in the country and putting them in. That's not how it works. Like I still think there could still be coaches that don't understand how we're doing it, how there's a team from every region on the board. Once the first available team is in, then the next, we've kind of, deemed it as the elevator system, right? So, I still don't think there's, that people that work on Division III campuses understand how it works. And so, and I think that's part of the education that I think there's a lot of people that don't really realize the criteria. I think that they don't realize the process in which it happens. And I think especially because of, men's and women's basketball, and it's so out there and public, and which is so great. It's so great for the game. But then on the back end, I think we've just lacked a little bit of education on how it works. And so I think that's kind of like a double-edged sword. It is so popular and it is so public, and we've put ourselves out there as a committee to say, yes, this is what we're doing. But then I'm not sure, I think you and I spoke, I'm not sure people are really listening until now, until it like affects them, or they haven't been ranked,
Until it
or like
matters.
yeah. And so and I wish that we could do more education. That's something that I've talked to some of my committee members about, getting involved with the NABC. I wish that we could help our membership learn a little bit more about how this process works, because it is really important that what your best chances are, and how you can help kind of manufacture your way into the tournament, right?
Right.
Like with a positive SOS and a positive experience. And if you don't get an AQ, how you can help your schedule, how you can help yourself. And these are all things I've learned. I mean, I had no idea when I got on this committee, like how hard it is. I mean, it's hard in Division III, because really your only way in is that conference tournament
Right.
if you don't work hard at scheduling and traveling. And especially if you live in an area like where I am, where our school is located, you got to get out and travel.
Right.
So I think that's something that's, one of my takeaways with my time on the committee is I wish, and maybe COVID had something to do with that, because we kind of just shut down for a couple of years, and maybe people just forgot we didn't have a tournament, and then we got back into it. And but yeah, I hope that we can do a lot more.
It's
A lot more
probably
education.
probably a greater level of awareness than you realize. You're just feeling certain things this week because we're in the heart of it. But I
Yeah,
think what Mike Shower, what he did last year once the
yeah,
tournament came back, and then what you've done this year with your committee, you guys have made a lot of ground up on that front. But it probably feels to you like people don't all completely understand the rules, is what I hear you saying.
maybe. Yeah.
I can sense that. Just a couple more things on bracketing. I know you'll have kind of a seating order, and let's say you have a 1 to 16. Just to stress to people here, it doesn't mean that 1 to 16 in your seeds will all be first weekend hosts. There's a couple things. There's other factors. One is geography needs.
Yeah.
Just looking from the past, maybe we can think there'd be a Texas pod, and so maybe one of your 16 isn't one of those Texas, but they're going to get one. Or um, there's also things around just facility size, or history of hosting, or like there's other things besides the 1 to 16.
Yeah.
Is that correct? And is there anything you would add to that?
Yeah. So the 1 to 16 also, this is a year where the women's tournament has priority. So
Right,
if
right,
if there's any hosting implications there, where one of our hosts is also one of theirs, then they would have priority for the first weekend. We would have priority for the second. So we would certainly try to, if one of our hosting sites that we would have originally picked, so say we had a top team that maybe would have hosted, we would certainly try to maybe build our bracket to maybe where they, if it was a high enough seed, maybe they could have the hosting opportunity for the second weekend if they were a high enough seed. But that's just if they were, a high enough seed to be able to do that. So that's one implication that we have to work around this year. And we've already identified, Megan and I have already talked a couple times this week, and there's a couple hosting opportunities that we're working around. And there's one in particular game on the women's side that we'll be watching very closely. That will have some hosting implications
That's
for
great.
our
It's like a
side.
play-in hosting game. It's like a women's game that's like a hosting thing for the men. So that's
Yeah,
now
yeah. So we'll be watching that game on Saturday too in our
that's
room.
great.
So yeah,
On the hosting thing, when a men's team in the first weekend can't host because their women are hosting, I've heard you say you're going to protect the seeds.
Yeah, we'll still seed it properly.
Right.
And then we'll have another team in that pod host. And so we'll kind of build a bracket around that seed. And if a school in that, build that pod around someone else in that pod who's put in a hosting bid. So we would still, let's just throw it out. Let's say that whoever it was maybe, I don't know, a 4 seed. We would still have them be the 4 seed.
Gotcha. Yeah. So
Okay.
you don't blow that up and send them to an equal seed just because
Yeah,
the
no.
equal seed is close. You're
So
gonna
we'd still seed them as a 4.
right.
Somebody else in that pod would get the hosting opportunity.
That's I think that's important for everyone to know is that
Yeah.
that they're going to take care of they're going to seed the teams the way they should be seeded. And then if you can't host that first weekend because your women are, then yes, you're going to have to go somewhere, but it's still going to be a matchup that you would have played at your place. It's still going to be the
Correct.
same
Yeah.
bracketed pod.
Yeah, it's not like if you're like the number 1 seed, you would get
Right.
seeded against another number 1 seed all of a
Right.
sudden. Yeah,
Right.
like that wouldn't happen. Yeah.
Age old question here. Don't know that there's an answer. Is
Okay.
there in the pool C process, is there a winning percentage that's just flat out like you're looking at your board and it's just flat out too low? Like I've historically, I know that for the last 5 years, there's been one 630. I think there was a 654, and then everything else is like 667 and up. Is there a number where you're like, nope, it's just not good enough, sorry, or how does that work?
No, I can't say.
It's
And
just it's basically whoever comes to the board, you're going to evaluate the totality of the resume,
correct.
right?
Correct.
I mean, if it's so someone comes to the board 625 SOS ROs, you're just stacking that up with everyone else, and
With
then
everyone
you'll
else
see
that
how
is on
everything
there.
shakes up, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. I didn't think there was an answer, but
No, there's
that's a
no
hot
answer.
topic, right? So
Yeah, and it's at that point, we're truly we're truly voting too. So there's 10 votes. There's 10 of us at a computer voting. So yeah, we're voting.
and then final question on my end is just remind us again, how do you like evaluate RRO wins? Let's say one team has 4 RRO wins and the other team has 4. So you're just staring at a number that says 4, but then you dig deeper.
Mhm.
How do you try to separate what 4 is better than the other 4? How does that work?
Yeah, we go into where those teams are ranked within the regions. So we do what we call rack roundups. So every every committee member prepares like an Excel sheet that they present to the rest of the national committee. And so on RROs specifically, you're listing out for instance, like in my region, I would have listed out Randolph Macon, and their, RROs, all of theirs would be against whatever team they beat, the region that they're in, and what they're, currently ranked. And so, that's what we're evaluating in those.
Gotcha.
And
So
so if you have a team that's got RROs against a teams and regions that are like 2, 3, and a 4, and another team that we're evaluating has 3 wins against a number 7 team in a region, then we would evaluate the team A that had their wins against a 2, 3, and a 4. We would
wins
do
over
that as
wins over teams ranked higher in the region are valuable. Is there any, do you ever get into discussion at that point of like, hey, in this region, the number 6 team is kind of seated the same as the number 2 team over in this region, and so like, do you ever get into that, or is it just a 2 is better than a 6?
Sometimes we do. This week too, we had kind of like the top 16, right? We were like, well, we had them as a, if it was very, very close, right? I was like, well, we had them ranked number 1 in the country, you know?
Right.
We had them ranked, you know, if we just couldn't, I'm just using that as an example. I don't think we had 2 teams that beat Randolph-Macon. But yeah, we, you know, we would use that maybe to kind of break a tie, because we had some close ones this week. But yeah, we had, you know, and we'll have that again this week going into selections, because we're going to rank, you know, a top 20, you know, going into selections again, our top 20 resumes, because we're going to have that for hosting, you know, sites again. But we'll have that. I mean, but we're doing that. We're ranking those based on our criteria, you know,
Right.
like, yeah, this
Right.
is the number 1, you know, we're not using any other metric, you know, like the top 25 for D3 hoops. No offense, we're not using
Right.
that matrix or anything like that.
You're
We're
not pulling
using
up the Massey index. You're
yeah,
not,
we're like,
right.
yeah, we're using our
Like
metrics
if you had
of the
let's say you
ranking
had a
teams.
bracket seating of the top 16 to break a tie, you might say, hey, that team's 4 and this other RRO is 17. You could
Yeah,
go that route. You're using your own
we're using our data.
criteria.
Yeah,
And you are,
yeah,
but so yeah, my takeaways here is you're digging into RROs to try to
yeah,
separate them, and
yeah,
you're using your own stuff and
yeah,
looking at where they're ranked in a region and possibly even going into
yeah.
maybe even your
'Cause we-
national seedings and
yeah,
things.
I mean, we did have some teams this week that were like, wow, they had 3 top 16 wins. You know, it was like
Right,
that's a pretty impressive resume, you know. Or we had another team that had, you know, 2 top 16 wins, and then they had 3 wins or whatever within
right,
the region that were in the top 3. You know, so something, I'm just making that up, but like, you know, that's, you know, we're evaluating the wins like that. Or if, you know, you had a team that they had 4 regionally ranked wins, but like 3 of them were against a number 7 ranked team in a region, that's not going to hold as much weight in those RROs for our
right.
committee when we're looking at the totality of that resume as somebody that has 4 regionally ranked wins with beating teams that were ranked higher.
Final question.
Yeah.
Thank you for all of your time. I know how
Mhm.
busy this week is in
Yeah.
particular, but just to underscore this for people, I think this is important. Is like how seriously you guys take this task. Like you're feeling it this week, probably from a lot of different angles. Um, Everyone wants to make the NCAA tournament. You know, every coach does, every AD does, every school
Yeah.
president does, every fan does, every parent does, every friend does. And so everything is amped up this week.
Yeah.
And everyone's focused now because this is the selection week.
Yeah.
Just can you talk about the level of seriousness through which you and everyone on the racks in the national take this task? I would like to hear people have you talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think people really understand. I mean, we're truly I actually feel like this is my full-time job for the last like couple of weeks. I kind of forget that I'm also the athletic director. I hope my actual president isn't gonna watch this. Um, but yeah, I have put so much time into this, and I know a lot of our committee members do. But yeah, we also have other jobs, and most of them, I mean, I'm the only well, no, we have one other athletic director, and then the rest of them are coaches. So I can't imagine being a coach, trying to get my own team together and win. Like we have, I don't think it's pretty obvious. We have a coach on our committee that has to prepare his team this weekend for almost kind of like a playing game, right?
I think I
To
know
get
that
into it.
guy.
And I think we all know that guy. I mean, so he's doing this and doing that. I mean, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of stress. I mean, and it's a lot. So it's like, I mean, I'm planning, I mean, I have to be away this weekend. My team is hosting the conference championship here on campus. I can't even be here for that. So I'm hoping we can win a conference championship. We also have baseball and softball on campus this week. It's I have like this, like, oh boy, like I'm feeling a little guilty that I'm also in charge of the actual national championship tournament, but I also can't be here for my own campus. And so that's the level of commitment we all have, and that's how serious we take it. And so it is very, I mean, I obviously don't take anything personal. I mean, people can, disregard our rankings and think we're really horrible at our jobs, but we are doing the best we can. We're doing what we've been asked to do. And each week when we get off the calls, I think we all have confidence that we've gotten it right, because we've been consistent, we've been tracking it. I think that's what's been a little frustrating maybe for others, is that this is just who we are. This is our committee. And I think that's the other thing, like committees change from year to year, because we are,
Right.
people that kind of come and go. And but yeah, I think at the end of the day, we're gonna have 64 teams right on Monday, and that's the best part. And here in a few weeks, we're gonna have a national champion, and we're not gonna have I don't think we're gonna be having any conversation at the end of the day about if we selected the wrong teams, because I think we're gonna know we did select the right teams, because we're gonna have an awesome tournament. I think we all have the confidence in that, because we know that we have one of the best tournaments, I think, in the country. And I kind of say that with a little swag, just because we do such a good job. We have great support at the NCAA level, with the gentleman that we work with. We actually have a new NCAA liaison this year with the help of a former liaison as well. And I mean, we're just really excited to like get it going. So
Right.
it's like we just want to get past this week, get to our championship, and like really just like get that get the ball rolling, no pun intended, and have a great experience for our students.
Yeah, it's very well said. And just for everyone, before we started recording, I think what I told Sarah is that, when we met in October, Sarah was like, "Hey, let's talk about criteria. Let's go. Let's do this. Here we go. It's great."
Yeah.
January. All right, here we go. Let's talk. I'm excited. I
Yeah.
think when we signed into this Zoom and her video popped up, I could tell that the chair has taken a few blows this week. I could tell that, like, it's been a week, and so we're in the middle of it, everyone. She's explained a couple things, but for me, takeaways, they're following the criteria, and we can all have different interpretations of how you take 5 pieces
Yep.
and weigh
And
them,
look,
but they're
and
using the
look,
criteria.
yeah, we might all agree that the criteria is not the greatest. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah,
I
there's some
think.
things we've all like to
Yes.
improve certain
Yes.
things, but you're
Yeah.
using the criteria,
Correct.
right?
Correct. Yeah.
Not perfect system. And then part 2 takeaway is what we just talked about at the end, is this group cares deeply. They're trying to get the right teams in based on the criteria and the system. And so, folks, hug a member of the committee when you see them out at the pods. First weekend pod, who's ever
Yep.
out there, give them a
We'll
big
be there.
hug.
Yep.
Second weekend, Fort Wayne. Appreciate, Sarah, you making time for this. I do know that, like, again, you have this full-time job, and then you have the other full-time job, but you don't want your president to know that you're not doing as much as you're supposed to be. And
No,
then you're going to,
he's been great. So if he
yeah,
does listen to this, he's been really awesome. And he does brag that, oh, my athletic director is the chair of the men's basketball team. So I think everybody in Maryville knows that I am. So he
hopefully
is,
the president does tune into the QCast, so that maybe he'll even, shout
yeah,
something out. We'll see. But
yeah. Okay.
when do you head to Indy?
I leave at 7 a.m. tomorrow.
Okay, so things are happening. So here we
Yep.
go. We all have stuff to do. I got more like mock brackets to make.
Yeah, you
I'm
better.
just grinding. I'm in such a grind trying to get some things right. Sarah Quatrocky, you've been awesome. This has been the QCast season
All
3,
right.
episode 24. Good luck to you and your committee. And thanks for
All right.
everything you're
Thank
doing.
you. I'm sure I'll
Thanks.
talk to you again soon.
Thanks.